A pleasant good evening to our viewers and to those who are listening in via the various media methods. Welcome again to another Just the Facts program. Basically, this program is an informative one, a discussion that we need to have, a conversation with our people, informing them through this program, Just the Facts. In studio this evening with us is the Honorable Representative for District Number 4, which is the largest district in Anguilla. He is on my immediate left, the representative of the, as I said, the largest constituency. First time candidate around the block. We'll hear much more from him as we go along with the program. And on my right is the Honorable Island-wide electoral candidate, Mr. Jose Vanterpool, who would have made history in 2019, I believe it was, when he became the youngest parliamentarian. And if I'm not mistaken, and he'll correct us as we go forward, the youngest elected member, I believe, in 2020. And we'll hear a bit more about that as we go through with the program. But in order to get us started, of course, we have to invoke God's presence. And we'll ask the Honorable Jose Vanterpool to give us a blessing.
Thank you, Honorable. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for bringing us here safely. We thank you for the gift of life. And we thank you for the blessings that you've continued to bestow on the nation of Anguilla and the people of Anguilla. We thank you for the gift of leadership and for the people of Anguilla reposing their trust in us to lead this great nation forward. As we continue to make decisions on behalf of this nation and the people of Anguilla, we ask for wisdom and as well as for guidance. And we thank you for this avenue where we can share with the people of Anguilla. As this evening's discussions take place, we ask for clarity of thought and of word, and that the people of Anguilla may be blessed and more informed as a result of the governance in this nation. May this proceeding continue to enlighten our people, and we give us safe passage as we return home. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you very much, Honorable. To our viewers, again, let me reiterate how important it is for us as elected parliamentarians and members of the government, Anguilla United Front government, to communicate and to inform you, the people of Anguilla. I think we've come of age where it is necessary for us to inform the public as to what is taking place in the various ministries and government and the administration of this beautiful country of ours. It is our responsibility to let you know what is happening, to disseminate information, factual information, as we are here on this program, Just the Facts, the factual information, so that you, the people, will be informed and would know exactly what is taking place within this country from your elected officials. This afternoon, this evening, as I mentioned, we have the Honorable Cardell Richardson, and he is the representative for District Number 4, which is the largest district in Anguilla. And as I would have said before, that this was his first time around the stake, the political stakes, so to speak. And last week he was here, and I would have asked him at that particular point in time, to give us a rundown as to his experiences, which he would have done. This week, we're going to go into much more detail in terms of my questioning and the explanation and information that the Honorable Cardell would give you. So I'm going to start off by asking Cardell, in terms of your background, where you have come from, how you get to this point. We all know, those of us who know you, you're agriculturalist by heart, a businessman, a young entrepreneur, one who has this country at heart, and stepped forward and took up the mantle to be able to lead your people and to be the representative of District Number 4. So, in a nutshell, you can give us, a synopsis of how you get here and, you know, the trajectory that you use in order to be able to, you know, develop and what experience you would have to bring to the table.
Pleasant good evening to everyone listening via social media and other platforms. For most people who've known me, I would have attended the Stoneground Primary School, then later on went on to Albina Lake Arch Comprehensive, and then went on to university in America, where I studied information systems. Then later came back to work with the Government of Anguilla, where I worked within the IT department for 18 years. After that, I decided to, you know, leave government and start my own business. But while I was working in government, actually, I used to farm. Get up all in the mornings, and after work, I go on the farm. And I did that for about 18 to 20 years. We would have exported a lot of stuff to St. Martin. We even exported to St. Bart's one time, some tomatoes. So I have a love for agriculture and farming. Even before farming, my mom had a greenhouse. So I would always help her on Saturdays and the weekends, and you know, with the greenhouse and the plants and the stuff like that. So I always had a love for growing stuff and watching things grow. So that's basically my background as it relates to farming. And then I started my business with heavy equipment, and I've been doing car sales for over 20-something years, closer to 30 years. So I've always had an interest in business. And a matter of fact, I also have a minor in business management. So that's when the interest comes from business.
Yeah, I must admit though, it's admirable, really. You spoke about you've been in the IT department for almost 2 decades, yeah. And you stepped out of the comfort of the civil service, so to speak, and venture into you know, agriculture and farming and into business.
Right.
There are not a lot of people who would take that bold step. So getting involved in politics now, now it sort of opened up my eyes in terms of, you know, venturing out. You're not afraid, no, you know, of the unknown, so to speak, you know. You are the parliamentary secretary, you know, with responsibility across ministries, so to speak, in the Ministry of Economic Development, and then in MICO as well, infrastructure, and communication and housing and so on. And both of these ministries are heavily laden, so to speak. In terms of the agricultural aspect of it, I know that there is work in terms of a green space and those agricultural things, and food security and food production, and you know, the expansion of a food orchard and stuff like that. I mean, what would you want to tell the viewing and listening public with respect to what I just mentioned from a government standpoint, from an administrative standpoint?
Well, definitely we've been doing a lot of work with the green space and trying to enhance that. And we're going to be expanding it towards the right. That's going closer to Nussboy's establishment. So we're actually going to be clearing some land and further expanding it and implementing some more trees, fruit trees. So we're going to be expanding that. There are also some other initiatives that we want to do. So we're just kind of fleshing them out to see what approach and what would work best within that space. As it relates to the fruit orchard, that's some initiative that Mr. Hodge, Honorable Kyle Hodge would have initiated. Mm-hmm. And we have several fruit trees in that orchard at the moment. And we ordered a container of fruit trees, so to finish, because it's not completed as yet. So we have now ordered another container of fruit trees that will be coming shortly to the island.
Okay.
To complete the project.
Yeah. So there's
and saying that we do plan to, because there are other folks that are interested in starting some orchards outside of what we're doing as a government initiative. So people are definitely buying into what we are saying, and there are at least 3 individuals who would have approached me and have vacant land that they want to start a fruit orchard on. Okay. So we're going to be definitely looking at helping them. We have already had discussions with the department, and we're going to be liaising with those individuals to see how best we could accommodate and assist them.
Okay. Well, you know, like I say, you know, this is not a political campaign, so to speak. I mean, you were elected um, not for what you would have done, let's say, within government,
Yeah.
but I'm sure that the work that you would have done outside of government and IT and so on, and you know, as the person you are and the interest that you have in the island, you know, people will see through that in terms of, you know, going forward. I note that you seem very passionate about agriculture.
Oh yeah,
And when when you spoke about, you know, going forward and, you know, 3 persons who would have vacant land, you know, coming forward and having a discussion with you in order to moving forward. So I get the sense that the farmers, you know, the farming community, I'm sure would feel comfortable, much more comfortable discussing with you than with me. I only know about a hoe and a peak and those sort of things.
Not cutting across, Mr. Rogers, but precisely, I know when I was during campaign time and leading up to general elections, there were several farmers who would have approached me and said, "You're the right man for the job," in terms of, because for years we talk about farming, but we just pay lip service and don't give the farmers what they adequately need to actually grow stuff and be able to produce. And you know, with me being here now, it's a different approach, or more seriousness, somebody who's seasoned in the farming, experience in it. So they do have the trust in me to deliver in this area.
And while I know this is not in your area, I know that the Honorable Kyle Hodge has been working diligently to try and sort out the water situation that we're having, so that at least the farmers will be able to get water at a reduced or free, really, you know, so to speak, moving forward, so that we can encourage, you know, the production of food and so on and so forth. And this is not far-fetched, you know. The more things change, the more they remain the same. Some people say that. You know, being on Earth for more than 6 decades, you know, I know very well, and we didn't have all this high tech and stuff like that, and the farming that my parents and the folks of her generation did, you know, was different to what it is today. But we survived. So with all the technology and so on and so forth, and you, basically with the background that you have and the passion that you have for agriculture, I have no doubt that in the next 4 years and beyond, that we'll see significant strides in the farming and agricultural
and like you said with Mr. Hodge, Kyle Hodge, you know, I would have spoken to him and told him, if we're going to be serious about farming, we have to address the water situation.
Okay.
And he has listened. And with the pilot project that we are doing, he would have instructed them to make sure that the farmers have free water for this pilot project.
Nice.
So we are listening and we are taking actions.
Yeah. And you would know much more about this than I do, and many Anguillians, in terms of this whole notion about the hydroponic farming and you know, shade houses and so on and so forth. Give us a little brief on that in terms of an explanation, you know, what that is all about, you know.
Okay, so currently we have some shade houses that the previous administration would have bought in.
Right.
So currently there are 20 shade houses that has been ordered and assembled here in the valley. All has not been assembled as yet, and then there are some that is on personal lands also. And we would have also ordered some. We'd have ordered 10 shade houses, and we're looking to order hydroponics. So the difference is some of the problems that we are faced is that during the cool months, like from November to about April,
March, April.
we could grow pretty much anything. But then as it started to get hotter, and in the summer months, we can't produce. So the farmers just leave the plots vacant and they grow up with bush. So we want to change that approach where we introduce hydroponic greenhouses, where you could, with these are climate controls, and you pretty much could grow anything all year round. So if you look, for example, with Naradin's, that's what he has in Sunny Ground, he grows his lettuce all year round.
Okay.
So that's the difference between the hydroponics and the greenhouses. So we have to, with time, technology is changing, and we have to change with the time also and improve on technology, even as it relates to farming, you know. So, and I know sometimes there are other farmers who do the traditional crops, like peas and corn and yams, they try to tell me, Carl, don't forget us. We're not forgetting them, you know. So we have also identified some land that we're going to just allow them to use for that type of growing, traditional.
Well, if you if you leave out the traditional crops like peas and corn, yams and potatoes, you'll be leaving me out. That's what I.
Well, myself too, because I would have grown a lot of corn back in the day in Ray Hill, and even when I had my farm there in the valley, I would have grown a lot of corn also.
Yeah.
So I do understand the need for the traditional farmers. But saying that also, we want to bring the traditional farmers and introduce them to some new technologies, like maybe drip irrigation, because sometimes they may plant a crop, but they don't have water all year. It's not accessible to water.
Right.
So there's the folks in the Department of Agriculture are looking at new varieties, potatoes and stuff like that, that we could put on a drip system to allow bigger yields, and that could actually grow a little faster.
Okay. And then you mentioned that the Honorable Kyle Hodge, looking into water production and the availability of water for the farmers, that will assist with it.
That has been done.
Okay.
That has been done for the
Good.
pilot project. So they have,
Good.
right now it's a pilot project where the Department of Agriculture will be doing the first phase. And that plot has free water.
Okay. And again, this program, Just the Facts, and you point out that some of the shade houses would have been brought in by the previous administration. Right. Just the facts, we're laying them out, apolitical, and we have to thank them for bringing them in. You would have ordered some more, and
yes.
As the need arises, you go ahead and push it forward. Because at the end of the day, it's Anguilla, and whether the AUF is in office, APM, or some other entity is there, at the end of the day, this is home for us, and we've got to do what we can, so that we can improve the lives of our people. And while we're on agriculture, livestock, what is happening in terms of that? What is your take with it?
As it relates to the livestock, we would have just invested over $45,000 in some procuring some feed and litter for the different animals. We would have bought in some sheep and goat, and these are expensive. So we're actually trying to improve the breeds that we have here, so we don't have the interbreeding and so we're looking at good quality animals that we could have for meat and stuff like that. So that's a project that we have taken on. I've also had the privilege to see these animals myself. Actually, a weekend I was driving through the valley area, and Mr. Van der Poel would have stopped me and told me, the animals are here, come take a look at them. So I had the privilege of seeing those animals myself firsthand. And we are still continuing the initiative with the chicks. Right now we have an order and procurement that we are looking to get some more birds in for those who are interested in the layers and the broilers.
And you mentioned, the animals and the interbreeding and so on and so forth. I would hope that, and it's my wish, to be able to sit with some of the, the senior civil servants in the various departments in this setting, so that we could discuss those sort of things. Whether we will have to bring in Mr. Vanderpool and Dr. Vanderpool, who's a vet, so we can have some discussions, so that we'll inform the general public with respect to where we are going and so on and so forth. And I say that in all openness and honesty, because at the end of the day, the expertise that we have here in Anguilla, to have a full discussion, a display of just the facts, laid out and, for the people of Anguilla and those who are listening in to be informed, factually informed, I should say, if there's such a description, going forward with it, Before I give you a break, I've got to ask you, and I guess I would expect a certain leaning in terms of your answer. There's been a lot of talk, and I see down just there in the Valley Bottom area, right above the tourism building, a lot of stuff is going on there in terms of agriculture and so on. And there's no secret that that area would have been, set aside by the former administration for an athletic track. What are your thoughts on it? I mean, in terms of that versus your passion.
Well, at the end of the day, it's a delicate situation, a delicate balance, but that area, the soil is just good for growing crops. We could take a track and we could put it anywhere, basically. You understand? But you can't take soil and put it anywhere and get the same growing conditions. For example, if you grow hydroponically, then the taste would be a little different than growing in the soil.
Okay.
So, and a lot of people, even when I exported tomatoes to St. Martin, they would tell you something about Anguilla. The taste of the tomatoes we have is so different than tomatoes that they import or whether they get it from a different country. So it has to do with our soil. As it relates to, and let's be clear, we have no objection with the racetrack. You understand? The athletic track. That is something that we want to see for the development of our young people and, to take sports to that other level. It's just that the location don't really correspond with what we want to move forward with. Yeah. But there's no doubt that we are still interested in the development of a athletic track.
I want to go back to, you mentioned the difference in taste of tomatoes. You grew tomatoes in soil over close to the airport,
yes.
Airport there. So you were referring to that in terms of your exporting them to?
Not so much, because generally our taste has the same as it relates to our soil type here in Anguilla, but like tomatoes that are grown in the DR, they definitely have a different taste. Our tomatoes that are grown in another country have a different taste than our. So it has to do with the soil.
Yeah, okay. Well, the reason why I say that is because I was in the Virgin Islands a few years ago, and they said that, the fish from Anguilla tastes different. Yeah. So
I'm sure they meant it tastes better.
Well, I guess so. At that time, folks used to fly, I think, fish down and stuff like that, and I was wondering, well, you're flying fish down, from Anguilla. They said, no, Anguilla fish tastes different, so that's the reason why I ask with respect to, the taste for the tomatoes and so on.
At the end of the day, we are talking a lot about food security, and there are not much arable land that we have for growing crops. So I'm pretty sure we could put athletic track somewhere else, but we can't always put land somewhere else. Okay. And this administration is keen and serious about food security.
And we're serious about the youth as well.
Of course.
And we were in the process of acquiring land somewhere in order to be able to realize the athletic track as well. I mentioned early on at the beginning that you are the representative for the largest district on island. So I will want to know exactly what are your plans, district-wise, because that is, those folks are the ones who would have put their trust and confidence and elected you overwhelmingly in the last election. So I'm sure that you would have some programs that you would want to implement over the next 4 years, so that the people in the area would see that you're a man of action and a man of your word.
Yeah. Well, one radio host would have said, Carl is a man of action. Fewer words, but a man of action. That's the kind of person I am.
Well, fewer words. Well, maybe you would have missed a gene, because my good friend Benson Knott had a lot of words.
He was different.
Okay.
Yeah. But I've been blessed with a good team in my district. Very supportive and very keen to the things that we want to implement within the district. And it's not just about me, it's about trying to enhance our district and the residents and the folks within the community, because we have done a lot of initiatives and it's for the old and the young. So it's a balancing act that we try to incorporate as we do various initiatives. So we would have started with the VSU, which is the Valley South United Community Group, and their
say that again.
VSU, which
VSU?
VSU, which is the Valley South United.
Oh, Valley South, that's your
Valley
district,
South United,
District
yes,
4.
yes.
Okay.
And that community group is a non-profit organization, so a lot of the projects and initiatives are channeled through that group. So we'd have dealt with the restoration of and leasing of the Valley basketball court last year. Valley basketball court.
Okay.
Yeah. And we would have painted up, and we still have some more work to do on the walls. But we'd have resurfaced the floor and painted up, and the kids are excited about that and back to playing ball again.
Right. And that's the court next to Ashley's?
Right, next to Ashley.
Okay.
So one lady, one parent, she would have said to me, the kids don't have nowhere to play. Could you please hurry to but we had a lot of rain during that period, so it was setting back the gentleman that was actually doing the work, the contractor. And so I kind of told him, let's see how fast we get the kids back to playing again. So the kids are back to playing. Had the privilege of visiting them on 2 occasions, and they were happy and thankful. So those are the kind of things that we want to do throughout the communities.
Okay. And that's the Valley South?
Yes,
All right.
yes,
Okay.
Valley South United would
Okay.
have done that initiative. And later on, we're going to be doing the same thing in the basketball court in Ray Hill.
Okay.
So we have some great news we're going to be soon bringing to the general public as it relates to that, but we're not ready to speak to that as yet.
Okay, I was about to ask that because, in the several public press conferences and so on, the Minister of Education, Social Development and so on, the Honorable Shelia Rogers-Webster, would have mentioned that, mentioned the acquisition of 2 pieces of property in District 3 that the government was seeking to acquire. You did mention about the basketball court up in Ray Hill, and you also mentioned that it seems like you're not prepared to say what is transpiring with respect to that. But I mean, you're the representative now, so you.
I doesn't want to jump the gun.
Okay.
As it relates to that,
But something is happening.
There's something in the works.
Okay.
So
okay.
hopefully within the next couple of weeks we'll be able to disclose what has transpired.
Well, maybe I can assume, but seeing that this is just the facts, I won't make an assumption. And I'll wait until until you're ready with the facts to come out and get it done. Yeah. So the basketball court in Ray Hill, the basketball court down there. Any other? Yeah,
and there's a green space that we're actually looking to develop in the Farrington area just above Mega Savers. So last year we'd have cleared the land. Okay. We still have to we're in talks with the landowners and trying to finish up some paperwork but we already have a 3D drawing and layout of how that's supposed to look and what we're going to have in that area.
Okay.
And the folks in that area are very excited about what we are planning to bring to the Farrington.
Okay, good. And as a true district representative, you're laying out, the plans that you will have for your district and for the people,
right?
And the electorate in that area. Of course, I will be asking you to come and give us updates as we go along, and disseminate the information that you were not ready to release here tonight, but in time to come.
Yes, hopefully that'll be coming shortly.
Okay, good.
And one of the other initiatives we have done, several others. We have a healthy snack day, and that's every last Friday of the month. Where we give healthy snacks to the kids in Valley School, the whole school. So we supply them with, fruits and a fruit bowl.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. And so that's going to take place this Friday. And for this year, we're going to be also rolling it out to Sunnyground School. So Sunnyground School will also be a benefit from that initiative. Yeah, because I would have attended Sunnyground's primary school also, even though it's outside my district. So and to be quite frank, it's not just about District 4, it's about Anguilla in general.
There you go.
I just want to give back as much as I can to the different communities.
Yeah. You mentioned on more than one occasion, Stony Ground School, It has been renamed to the Aurelia Kelly.
Yes, yeah, Aurelia Kelly.
And at the beginning, I was a teacher over there. I taught there for quite some time, But it is good to see. Then the West End, Alvin Allison Primary School, and Morris Vanderpool, and Vivian Vanderpool School, and so on and so forth. Again, as a representative, you're looking, to really and truly duplicate, what is happening not only at the Valley Primary School but throughout.
Right.
While we're on this conversation, would you have anything else to by way of information and facts, to be able to relate to your people in District Number 4 and Anguilla in general, in terms of what you want to do going forward?
Well, one other initiative that we did last year, and it's going to be annual, was the Joanne Howard Youth Basketball Camp, and that was phenomenal, where we had some coaches from America and some trainers from America was involved with the camp for that week with the kids. So that is something that's going to be ongoing every summer. So the kids are definitely going to be looking forward to that, where we could, harness the skills and have the kids in an environment and, something that they love to do, and see how best we could help promote them to, safe space and doing something they love. So, I like to see young people get involved in different positive things, and not just, do things that are not.
I know over the years that Mr. Kelly, Eddie Kelly, would have been involved in bringing a lot of those NBA basketball players and even football players.
Yeah, he's still involved.
Oh, he's still involved.
Yes.
Okay, good. But we want to hail him up and to thank him for the work that he continues to do for us here in Anguilla and the young folks and so on and so forth. Because yes, it's football season now, and Super Bowl and everything is in the air in the United States. But I first met Warren Sapp. I think he played for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, several years ago. I met him here in Anguilla, and it was through, Eddie Kelly, Mr. Kelly. So we continue to thank Mr. Kelly and all of those who would have contributed to Anguilla and continue to contribute to Anguilla for the overall development of our youth and the people of Anguilla in general. We welcome it, and at the end of the day, we're going to try and make this place much better than we met it. Thank you very much,
Thank you,
Honorable Cardell Richardson, the representative for District Number 4. I'm not quite finished with you as yet.
No problem.
But I have the youngest parliamentarian. Last week we were here, we spoke about the historical achievement of the Honorable Premier, first female Premier of Anguilla. And this evening we have the youngest parliamentarian in the history of Anguilla sitting next to us. Because of, I would have said last week, your absence, I would have given an update, and that's the reason why you are not here, because of previous engagements. And you're here this evening, and you are the youngest minister too. So again, history in its making. I'm not going to talk about the familial ties, but at the end of the day, you have a ministry. It's a transformational ministry in terms of the heavy lifting. Maiku, as I would have said on various campaign platforms, that the ministry of Maiku is one, you see things, it's tangible, so to speak. I would have spoken of several ministers of infrastructure before your time. Go back to Nashville, Webster, Kenneth, Belto, Curtis, Hayden Hughes, and now yourself. There's a lot going on, and there's a lot that you will have to explain to the general public, by way of information and communicating with them. I think we would have come of age where the facts, and just the facts, will have to be put out there for our people to really be informed, and they decide as opposed to having this whole political back and forth and responding and so on and so forth. Because we know folks who try to draw the present administration and to draw the young ministers offside, so to speak. But we'll have to stay focused and going forward. There's so many questions that I have. I don't even know where to start. But let me put it this way. In terms of, I'll start with Anglic. Where are we in terms of Anglic and renewable energy per se? What can you tell the public where we are in terms of that? In terms of discussions with, CDB, in terms of discussions about, we heard a lot about PPA from the former administration and so on. Where are we with respect to that?
Okay, Honorable, thank you for the question. Unfortunately, the first thing that comes to mind when you ask where we're at right now in terms of Anglic renewable energy is 20 to 30 years behind where we needed to be.
Okay.
And I think that that's just a simple reality. We would have known that from the early 2000s, particularly when Mr. David Carty, the now chair of the board, was the Speaker of the House. He would have utilized the House of Assembly as a vehicle to engage in studies for Anglic transitioning to renewable energy, the feasibility, the viability. I believe he would have gone as far as making contacts with the Bill Clinton Foundation to get some funds that were available on the outside to benefit especially places that are at risk, such as Anguilla and the other Caribbean islands. And since taking up the ministry, I believe that report was a 2007 report. The most recent report that we would have had would have been completed in April of 2025. And we now have the output of the Rezimbit program. Now, the outputs of this program is very important. It outlines the cost of service. So what is the cost of delivering electricity to the people of Anguilla? What is the cost of generation? How can that cost be mitigated if you were to transition from fossil fuels to renewable sources? What are the different sources? It would have had a number of outputs that would have come out of that study, and all of them good. And we are currently using that in an action plan to formulate the way forward. But the reason that I say that we're decades behind is this is a number of reports that we've seen delivered over the years. I've seen 2021 reports and studies that were conducted, 2014, as I say, going back as far as 2007. So where we are at right now in the ministry is saying that it's enough of the reports, enough of the studies. It's time for us to transition towards a renewable energy future for Anguilla. And that's going to be essential for a number of reasons. When we look at some of the biggest costs in terms of cost of living to households or as well as to businesses, the biggest cost right now tends to be the cost of energy, and energy touches everything. We're talking about if you go to the supermarket to buy food and that food is being held in a freezer, the cost of running that freezer is based on the cost of the fossil fuels and the cost of generating electricity. So that cost is wrapped up ultimately in the cost of food, which means that now if electricity is higher, your food bill is higher. So by focusing on bringing down the cost of electricity, we are fundamentally bringing down the cost of living for businesses, the cost of food for families who may already be struggling to make ends meet, so to speak. But then we need to consider Anguilla not just in its current context as being one island within the Caribbean region, but realize we are a nation in a global community. And we would have seen due to COVID and Hurricane Irma, the impact that external shocks can have on our economy. We see recently what just took place between the United States and Venezuela, and how as a result of what happened between those two nations, our airspace and regional airspace was shut down. And that had a number of impacts, not only for our airport, but for our economy. Some persons who were scared about traveling to the region would have canceled their trips, so there was a knock-on impact to our tourism industry. But when we look fundamentally as to what that issue was about, I know many people have their different concerns as to what was the underlying thing, but fundamentally it was oil. And when we look at oil, if we have such geopolitics making the fossil fuel supply volatile, and the cost of supplying that oil goes up. Let's say that oil is no longer accessible to the people of Anguilla. That has further implications on Anglic, the cost of generating electricity, and thus the cost of living, cost of doing business, cost of food going up. But if we look at what's currently taking place in Cuba, as a result of them being cut off from Venezuelan oil, it has had serious impacts on their economy to the point where it's destabilized and they are facing rolling blackouts because their generation capacity has been significantly cut down. So as you were talking with the Honorable Parliamentary Secretary about this nation's or this administration's focus on food security and food generation, it's part of our wider focus on ultimately establishing Anguilla's resiliency, our ability to stand on our own, and reducing our susceptibility to those external shocks. So one thing that we are immensely focused on, and I'm happy to say that while we are decades behind where we are supposed to be in terms of Anglic leading the way in terms of renewable energy, this is the closest that Anglic, Anguilla, or the government in partnership has ever been to actually realizing renewable energy.
Okay.
And the reason I say that is there are a few things that are essential when it comes to renewable energy. Now, over the decades, the cost of the technology has, whether it's the batteries, the panels, it has been significantly reduced, which makes it closer within reach for us to be able to afford it. A major component as it relates to being able to generate renewable energy is the lands. And persons would always say, well, where can we get the land? Well, since we've been elected over, less than a year, we have been able to, through several discussions with Anglic, be able to, one, quantify the amount of land that is necessary for us transitioning towards the renewable energy. But not only that, work with them so that we have made the crown lands that they need available to them while they also focus on getting the private lands that are needed. So Anglic has now more than enough land in order to enable them to realize this transition. Okay. So the final piece of the puzzle that was missing, other than the will to do it, was the financing. And the transition towards renewable energy, especially at utility scale, such magnitude, it comes at an expensive cost overall. And that's why really and truly it's important for the utility to lead it. Because once the utility has that investment, they are able to trickle down the effects and the benefits all across society. Now, I know during 2020 and 2025 especially, we would have heard a lot of rhetoric about, oh, the best way to go is a PPA. And for the benefit of the general public, PPA is essentially a power purchase agreement. So the direction that the previous administration would have wanted to take is to get a third-party provider, whether from the US or somewhere international, who has the capital, the financial wherewithal, to come to Anguilla and invest in building a 25 megawatt solar farm. And then essentially they would produce energy at a cheaper rate using our land and using our sun, and sell it back to Anglic, that then sells it back to the people of Anguilla. And the idea behind that is that ultimately...
I want you to repeat that again.
The idea of the power purchase agreement
PPA,
would have been to bring a foreign entity into Anguilla, have them invest using our land, using our sun that God blesses us with. You know, we don't get much rain around here. And essentially, they would generate the electricity at a cheaper rate, and sell it to Anglic to then sell it on to the people. Now, we have to understand that that third party isn't coming in as a philanthropist. They're coming in to make a profit. So while we cannot deny that ultimately the cost of electricity would have ultimately been cheaper, that would have also included their profits. So this administration held an opposing view that if Anglic is able, if a third-party provider finds this being a viable and a worthwhile venture, then why not support Anglic in making the transition themselves? And so that the cost benefits and the profits can be retained locally. Because when we look at Anglic, Anglic is one of the final local institutions that is still 100% owned by the locals. So rather than have those profits leave our shores, we felt it would be better to have it benefit the people of Anguilla. So the previous administration would have said Anglic is not able on their own to be able to fund the renewable energy transition.
And what do you think that was based on?
Well, personally, I don't know if it was due to them being ill-informed. Maybe it was a case where they genuinely felt that way, but they didn't have all of the information.
Okay.
Or maybe it was just a difference of opinion where they felt the power purchase agreement route was the better way.
Yeah.
But
Taking the easy way out?
well, it definitely would have been the easier way out. But when you look at the long-term impacts and benefits to Anglic as a utility and retaining profits locally, I don't think long-term that it would have been the best result overall for the people of Anguilla.
Okay.
So one of the things that they used to justify the power purchase agreement was the fact that Anglic did not have the financial wherewithal in order to secure a loan on their own. And so they said that Anglic, even though it's a private company, would need government to secure that loan.
That would be local government or the UK blessing?
The local government, and they were saying even further that the local government could not give that blessing because the UK government has contingent liability and would not allow them to give Anglic that blessing. So overall, to sum it up simply, we are saying that Anglic did not have the financial viability to transition on their own, and government was not in a position to be able to bless it. And so I feel like throughout all of that rhetoric, the Caribbean Development Bank was one of the institutions that was somewhat demonized in the sense of saying, well, the CDB won't give this loan unless government guarantees it.
Yeah, and while you're on that, about CDB, Caribbean Development Bank.
Yes, the Caribbean Development Bank.
Yeah. In terms of even the generators that Anglic uses, I'm sure in the past that they would have had loans, whether it was guaranteed by the government, would have gone through CDB in order to acquire some of those generators as well. So the reason why I asked that is because you said that, one of the reasons that, Anglic would not have been on their own to be able to do that. How did you address that? What are your thoughts in terms of going forward?
Well, based on the information that I would have seen, I have not seen any viable proof that CDB made it a requirement to say that the government of Anguilla would have to back it, or we need the UK's blessing via contingent liability in order to move forward with the project. As you would have mentioned, Anglic would have had several loans from the Caribbean Development Bank, not only for some of the generators they had before, but we know that in 2017, Anglic would have installed a 1 megawatt solar farm that unfortunately was destroyed due to the passage of Hurricane Irma. That solar farm was being able to be financed via funds through the Caribbean Development Bank.
Okay.
So it was interesting. In April of last year, I would have attended the Caribbean Renewable Energy Forum with the hopes of going out there.
Where was that?
That was held in Miami. Okay. So that brings together persons within the renewable energy sector, particularly as it impacts the Caribbean region, to come together to have discussions on the technology and, to create synergies so that you can have avenues to transition. And one of the things that really broke my heart while attending the forum was hearing all of these institutions, whether it's the World Bank, the European Union, go on stage and talk about this is the time to transition, and talking about the billions of dollars that's available for the renewable energy transition. And I would have gone to all of these institutions and only to be told the money that we have, yes, it's available for these projects, but unfortunately, due to your status as a British overseas territory, you are not eligible to access these finances. So take, for example, me speaking to a representative from a German company that, whether it's the government of Germany, that has made money available for investing in renewable energy projects within the Caribbean region at either low cost or no cost. It could even be grants. For them to say, well, how can we explain to the government of Germany when the British just left the European Union that we are going to give our funds to a British overseas territory when that should be the job of the United Kingdom? So I kept getting rejection after rejection due to our status as a British overseas territory. What really got me, felt like I was between a rock and a hard place, was finally finding out that there was a representative there from the Foreign and Commonwealth Development Office. So I went to them and I explained the situation. I say, well, due to our status as a British overseas territory, we can't access these finances. So I come to you, only for them to say, well, there are different branches of the FCDU and you do not qualify for what we have here. This is also for the independent countries. So I said, well, let me explain. Let me get a quick sanity check. You're telling me by virtue of us being a British overseas territory, I can't access their financing. But by virtue of me being with you and being a British overseas territory who you represent, I also can't access your financing? The person was a bit lost for words at the time. They did introduce me to some UK ministers who we engaged in some dialogue with, and we still have ongoing dialogue directly with the UK government to see what areas they're able to assist with, because they recognize the rock and the hard place, so to speak, that we were in between. But while at the Caribbean Renewable Energy Forum, I had the chance to meet President Daniel Best. He is the president of the Caribbean Development Bank.
Of CDB.
CDB.
Okay.
And we were able to have a sit down, myself and the other representatives of the Anguilla delegation, and his entire team of renewable energy specialists who were there. And we engaged, we sold the vision, we sold that this is the one period where it seems that Anglic and government are not at odds, but the stars have aligned. And he assured me that all the CDB wanted was the political blessing of government to say that they support Anglic. They didn't need Anglic to secure the loan as government. They didn't need the UK government to step in and say, yes, we will cover this via contingent liability. They said anything or any territory they go to in a large-scale project like this, they just want to know that the utility and the government of the day are aligned in terms of vision. And I assured him that this administration was fully aligned with Anglic and would give its blessings.
So in a nutshell, what you were saying, what you said earlier, is that previously they said that the then government said that Anglic on its own couldn't do it. They had to have the government as a guarantor, and then the UK government would have to step in as well, the contingent liability and that sort of stuff. So at that meeting in Miami, you would have met the president of CDB.
Yes.
You and the entire team from Anguilla that accompany you. Just the facts.
Just the facts.
It was not you alone. And you were able to have that discussion with the president. And he assured you that, hey, Anglic and government need to be aligned, as one of the prerequisites, so to speak, in order to be able to secure the loan of that magnitude. Is that what?
Yes, and even beyond Anglic, we not only spoke about Anglic, while the whole point was to try and find financing for Anglic in a renewable energy transition, we went even beyond that, and we would have spoken to this administration's vision for future development in Anguilla. I would have explained to him that we were the home of the .ai domain, the fastest growing domain in the world.
Well, I have some questions about that. But
I'm sure you have, and we will get to that. But I also would have told him about our vision for wanting to see Anguilla develop within the space of technology, becoming a technological hub within the region, and particularly a home of excellence for artificial intelligence, not just the country that owns the domain, but the true home of .ai. We spoke to other developments that we would like to see, whether the deep water harbor, whether the infrastructural developments, and we talked about how the revenues coming in from .ai would enable us to be able to achieve it. All in all, it was a wide-spanning discussion that did include Anglic, and the president, he was blown away. He told me that the vision that I've articulated that this administration has for the direction Anguilla wants to go is fully in line with the 3 pillars that he believes and wants to see the CDB investing in, particularly within the region. So he said that he, within his power, will engage his team and push them in order to make sure that Anguilla realizes its renewable energy transition. But even beyond that, he wants Anguilla to consider the Caribbean Development Bank a true partner in our development journey. Okay. So this is the first phase, but...
So where we are now in terms of that partnership?
Yes, so coming out of that meeting, as the week after we would have returned back to Anguilla, I would have set up a call between the president, his vice president with respect to renewable energy projects and their entire team, as well as representatives from the Government of Anguilla, as well as Anglic, to start discussing and getting the ball rolling on this. Okay. Since then, we've had a number of things take place where we would have shared the outputs of the different energy studies that we would have done. Anglic would have shared their own internal plan, as well as studies that would have been done by WSP, a specialist in this area, Interestingly enough, the study that WSP would have done at Anglic was funded through the Caribbean Development Bank. So we let the president know you already have skin in the game. So I have to commend the team at Anglic. I have to commend my team at MICU. I have to commend all of my team members within this administration for their support, as well as the team at the Caribbean Development Bank. We would have had a delegation from the Caribbean Development Bank come to the island.
To Anguilla.
Yes, they would have met with all of the stakeholders. I would have joined them for a tour of the generation plant. They would have looked at the various sites of the land and studied the interconnectivities that would be needed. We would have also had a team that would have come from WSP, again funded through the CDB, to look at the current engines, the specs that would be needed for the new engines, and so a more technical aspect. And through a lot of back and forth in terms of dealing with the minutiae, the small details, just last week, January 14th, I would have gotten a call from the president of the Caribbean Development Bank, who had just been informed by the Secretariat that the board had met to consider Anglic's loan for the transition, and they have approved it. So right now where we're at, this week the loan documents will be sent over to Anglic, as well as, so we'll have a signing of the documents to make it official soon, but the board has already given the assurance that Anglic's loan is approved. So it goes to show that this was not done overnight. It was done by looking at the finances, by looking at the feasibility, looking at the returns and Anglic's wherewithal and ability to pay, as well as looking on the impacts of the people of Anguilla. And within less than a year, once the political will was there and the stars aligned, so to speak, we are now at a stage where we're ready to move forward. We have the financing in place, and the Caribbean Development Bank, I want to thank them and President Best for being a partner in Anguilla's journey in this process.
And while you're on that, I mean, today is the 27th. Just about 11 months since you were elected to office and would have assumed the responsibility of the minister responsible for MICU. What you outlined there is a major achievement. I can't wait until you sign the loan documents and reveal the quantum and whether it's in stages, phases, and so on and so forth. But just to say to our listeners and viewers, what you would have articulated there in terms of one aspect, the Anglic aspect of it, is tremendous. And it was not a travel, or some folks, the detractors would want to say, oh, the ministers are traveling up and down and all over and all sorts of stuff. You've got to travel in order to accomplish things.
The reality is you have to get in the room with the right people.
What you just said is that at that particular conference is where you met the president of CDB.
Indeed.
Okay, good.
The one thing I do want to clarify, since this is just the facts, is that it won't be my signature on the document, because again, this agreement is between Anglic and the Caribbean Development Bank.
Okay.
I, as minister responsible for utilities, I have nothing to sign.
Good. The political will, the wherewithal, and the leadership in terms of what it is. Thank you, Honorable, for that. The other thing is, you mentioned previously, they said it couldn't be done, Anglic couldn't do it on its own. And what you've said this evening is that it is being done, and they're accomplishing it on their own. Right. So we thank you. We thank for all the players, Anglic, yourself, the ministry, and your entire team for what you have just articulated. Another question, bring it back home now, in terms of the street lights. I'm sure that you would have been getting a lot of calls. I'm sure that the representative for District 4 and 3 and 2 and 1 and 6 and 7, the entire island, about street lights. What would you be able to say in terms of where we are, and we're in the process of negotiating, in the process of installing? What is the situation with respect to that?
So as it relates to streetlights, I would have alluded to the fact earlier that in previous administrations, there have been some contentious relationships at times between whether it's the government of the day and the board, or Anglic as the utility. And in 2023, I believe we would have seen it come to a head where there was disputes between the administration at the time, as well as the board and Anglic as a utility in terms of the rate that's being paid for streetlights. So in the Electricity Act, it outlines how much will be paid by the Government of Anguilla to Anglic on a monthly basis for the provision and support of these streetlights. At the time,
in terms of streetlights, was there a quantum with that in the act that you mentioned?
yes.
Because remember now, when we were growing up, there wasn't any street lights, and then there were a few street lights, then there were probably 200 street lights. Now they're probably, what, 2,000 or 3,000?
So in terms of the quantum, there was a set figure per month. But when this was agreed to between the government and Anglic, at the time the island had around 200 streetlights.
Okay.
And so the government would pay that monthly. But since then, Anglic has grown from supporting 200 streetlights across the island to about 2,000. So tenfold of what they were doing at that point in time. But according to the legislation was never changed to reflect the sliding up of the scale. Now, it was reflected over time that Anglic would invoice the Government of Anguilla on a monthly basis for the provisioning of the streetlights, and the government was used to paying it on a monthly basis. At some point, due to the friction between the government of the day and Anglic, they decided to take a strict stance and say, you know what, the legislation says we're going to pay X, so we're going to pay X, not $1 more. And what this means is you're kind of putting Anglic in a bind, because they now have to operate 2,000 streetlights on what they were being paid to operate 200. And we have to remember that Anglic is a private company. The board has a fiduciary responsibility to the shareholders not to operate at a profit or at a loss or to their detriment. So Anglic made a decision at that time, until the government and them could come to an agreement, to stop installing new streetlights. Now, we would have known that after the passage of Hurricane Irma, there were a number of streetlights that would have been damaged throughout the island, and a number of requests, and a backlog of requests actually, for the installation of streetlights in different areas. But seeing that incident came to a head and they had stopped installing streetlights, and since then other streetlights had stopped working, we got to a kind of stalemate position between the two, where they were deadlocked.
Okay.
And so what we are currently doing is negotiating with Anglic.
Okay.
There would have been some previous litigation between the Anglic and the Government of Anguilla that would have resulted in a settlement judgment. So we're trying to see how we can reconcile all of the various litigations to offset and to agree on a calculation going forward that is fair to the government and the people, because we are accountable to the people, but also fair to Anglic as a utility. Because when they don't put out street lights, it's the Government of the Anguilla that gets the call, and it's beyond just paying for streetlights. It's a national security concern, which is a responsibility of government.
That's right.
It's a safety concern for whether it's drivers or pedestrians on the road, which again is the duty of government. So it's about coming to an equitable point where we can both agree and move forward. And I think we're getting very close to doing that, as well as identifying what aspects of the legislation need to be changed in terms of calculating the quantum based on the amount of streetlights. And what we are also doing in the interim, the ministry is investing in solar streetlights. So we would have acquired some solar streetlights out of some of the savings that we had in the 2025 budget. And there is, within the 2026 budget, provision for ordering of more streetlights. So in addition to those that are being set up by Anglic, we can continue to light up some areas, particularly maybe even those where we may not have the connections necessary, but all in a way that is sustainable and resilient in terms of our green approach.
Right. You mentioned, you know, the installation of some of those solar street lights in places where, you know, the connection might be possible. I believe in order to install those street lights using Anglic's energy, there would have to be low tension wires, because I noticed that in areas where there are just high tension wires, you know, there are no street lights per se installed on the poles, unless there is a transformer and so on. And I'm just saying, I don't know the technology or the technical terms, but it's something that we can find out, because this is just the facts. So, you know, In those areas that they don't have that, you probably install the solar lighting and stuff. Honorable, there are so many things that we got to talk about, but we got to touch on some of these things, and I got to have your back too before we go. Has been a lot of talk out there about the Bermuda air, and I have heard all sorts of things about it. It would give the impression that this administration irresponsible, very irresponsible in terms of signing whatever it is, and it seemed as if though Bermuda air is making a difference in terms of the connectivity for the whole East Coast, So what would you be able to tell our listeners and our viewers, just the facts in terms of what surrounds Bermuda here and so?
Well, Honorable, I guess one of the things that I had been advised to do very early into becoming minister was to ignore the noise. And I guess I'm grateful for the time spent in opposition before becoming a minister. Because one of the things that I have realized that I'm not sure...
Ignore the noise, but just the facts.
You still have to respond,
Yes.
But in terms of ignoring the noise, you realize that the opposition has a role to play. But
Yes,
in terms of getting things done and progressing, I don't think they've realized yet that their job is to talk, and so they're doing their job.
Yes.
But I can't be distracted by that. The results and the numbers will speak for themselves, and this is why now we can speak and present the facts.
Okay.
So I would have been on air with CEO of Bermuda, Adam Scott, previously on Class FM. One of the things that was being touted in the public domain by detractors of this Bermuda surface is that the Government of Anguilla has signed a minimum revenue guarantee with Bermuda. Essentially, another thing they were saying, or another way they put it, is that we were paying for empty seats. Now, I have said it on radio, I have said it on multiple platforms at government press conferences. The CEO of Bermuda himself would have admitted to it live on radio that the Government of Anguilla does not have a minimum revenue guarantee with the airline.
And you're reiterating that?
I'm reiterating that no. He said that he would have liked for it, because of course, who wouldn't have liked for it? But we drew a hard red line. I can even say in the proposal that they put forward to us, it did include a minimum revenue guarantee. But when we told them that's a hard red line, we are not signing a minimum revenue guarantee, they acceded and took it out. Now, what we did enter into, or we did agree to do, and it's for the first season and the first season alone, is agree to a partnership. So they're a marketing partnership. So we would have invested some funds in the marketing of these new routes. And it's not something that's new. The Government of Anguilla has had previous...
And it's just for the first year?
It's just for, yes, this first season.
And this first season goes from
This
December?
first season will go from December until the end of April.
Okay.
So for each of the 3 new routes that we were introducing, we put a certain quantum to be able to allow them to effectively market the routes, especially given the fact that when we started talking to them, it was about April. And that's when they would have reached out to the Government of Anguilla and said, like, you know what, well, that's when the CEO first came and would have met with us at the ministry and met with the cabinet. And the new routes were launched in December. It takes a lot of effort to, in 8 months, go from talking about bringing in new routes in order to, and then delivering those new routes. As you saw, the first airline that came in, not only did it come in with the Bermuda tag, it came in bearing the branding Anguilla. Now, the beautiful thing about that is we were in Boston when it touched down to come and pick us up to come to Anguilla. And everyone in the Boston Logan International Airport would have seen Anguilla passing by. That is branding. That is market positioning. So people are, oh, what's this new airline and where is Anguilla? And today we're seeing the benefits. I remember in the December when the new routes were being launched, had tuned into a bit of an opposition show just for a few minutes, and I heard them say, oh, the country is empty. We have never seen a December that has been this slow. The hotels aren't occupied. The taxi drivers aren't walking. But we would have seen last week the tourism statistics come out for the December period, where December 2025 was the best December in the 33 years that we have been keeping records in Anguilla. In fact, we had over 20% more persons arrive in December 2025 than in December before.
Well, now I understand when you mentioned earlier that you're not listening to the noises and all of that sort of stuff, because just the facts, as you mentioned, can be verified.
And I'll go and expound even further. When we were talking about the potential of having unsellable seats on the plane, the plane has a capacity of 96 persons. Due to the length of the runway and weight calculations, if you assume everybody on the plane is a male, an adult male of a certain size with a bag of a certain size, you run the calculations with the fuel and the distance, you come up with, okay, of those 96 seats, we may only be able to have 76 sold on this route if we're at full capacity, or 69 on this route. And so the idea that, oh, we'll be paying for the extra seats, which again, for the listening public is not true. I am happy to say that there were days that the plane came in with 90 passengers and left with full capacity of 96 with the existing runway that we have. So a comment that I would have made before that I believe was taken a bit out of context, and I've seen it misconstrued in the public, that I would like to clarify and add some facts.
Please do.
In the House of Assembly, when it was asked what was the quantum of money that would have been, that would have formed that partnership between the Government of Anguilla and Bermuda, and again, that's just for this first season. The agreement does not extend into next season or beyond. I did not give the exact figure, and the reason that I did not do so is because we are currently negotiating with a number of other airlines that are interested in servicing Anguilla. In fact, right now at the ministry, we are going through a strategic plan in anticipation of attending Roots Americas 2026 in early March, where we are already preparing to have these discussions. So we don't want to give up our negotiating leverage, so to speak. But one of the things that I would have highlighted was based on the projections that were ran, and those projections were based on the same restrictions that we've been seeing, even increasing numbers. So we have more people coming in than we ran the projections on, that we could see as much as, so the upper limit, but again, conservatively so, a 3,300 return on investment in terms of funds spent.
Wow.
Now, this is what I want to explain, how we arrived at that figure. And to say a 3,300 investment, that's saying for every dollar that the government gives, we calculate based on those numbers that the Anguillan economy stands to gain up to 3,300 in terms of direct spend. Not the government of Anguilla, the economy.
You said that for every dollar the government gives, for every dollar the government invests.
Invest, because that is an investment. Right. So for persons who are saying that return is crazy, let me just explain a bit more as to how I arrived at those numbers. This was a strategic choice in terms of the three locations, Boston, Baltimore, and Newark, because that is directly into our main source market.
Yes.
In terms of the marketing and in letting people know that this is a new viable route, now you can fly directly to Anguilla. You now have not only repeat visitors coming, but you can expect to have more visitors coming, persons who are coming to Anguilla for the first time.
But what about making relationships with the various educational institutions on the East Coast?
So I'll get to that.
Oh, you're coming to that too?
I'll get to that. Okay. So we have a number of persons, an increased number of persons coming to Anguilla. When we looked at the data that we were getting from Bermuda and even from some of the hotels and residences here in Anguilla, we were seeing that due to these bookings, there were longer stays being booked. So whereas the average stay might have been, say, around 6 days due to flights availability on American, having 2 flights per week from all of these various destinations, making it easier to get in and get out. We were seeing the average stay grow from about 5 to 6 days to around 11 days. When you then multiply the number of persons via the increased stays, via the average spend, which again, you can get this number from statistics and from talking to the various resorts, working out their daily, the average daily rate, etc. You can then extrapolate that information to see how much does the Anguillan economy overall stand to make on a monthly basis over these 4 months. You divide that total by the amount we initially invested, and that's how we got the ratio for every dollar, 3,300. So it's basic maths, and I can tell you that's how we figured that this is a sensible investment without me irresponsibly disclosing the figure and jeopardizing our negotiation stance. Now, in terms of engaging educational institutes, across the Northeast. That is something that, yes, indeed, we are planning on doing. In fact, when myself and the permanent secretary were in Boston for the inaugural flight, we would have passed the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, which is world-renowned as one of not only the greatest institutes, technical research places in terms of artificial intelligence, but globally renowned overall, which is now a direct flight away from Anguilla. Okay. We would have seen the Boston Research Institute as well as several other tertiary level educational resources. And I say resources because now that they are just a simple plane ride away from Anguilla, it is our intention to reach out to these institutions to let them know we would like to work with you to not only grow AI, not only increase our technical capacity to get to being that technology hub within the region, but in the arts, the sciences, in terms of working with our educational system here, in terms of bringing your researchers in. When I was in university, we'd have things like Girls Who Code, different medical institutions where during their time off, they would go and give back to varying communities. This now opens the door for us to do that, not only with these top level institutions in Boston, but across Baltimore, across Newark, with services around the tri-state area, across the entire East Coast. So these are opportunities that we're looking to build on this relationship with Bermuda Anguilla in order to benefit our society beyond just the direct flights for our visitors, our students, and the economic impact that's derived from there.
You touched on the Boston Institute of Technology, and you mentioned AI and so on. Where are we? Give us an update in terms of so that the listening and viewing audience would get the facts in terms of the .ai, the domain, contract, the numbers, there's identity digital, there are a lot of stuff. I mean, kind of zip that up for us, within the time that we have here so that we could, lay the facts out so that people could understand exactly where we are.
Okay. So we would know that for upwards of 30 years, Anguilla has been the home of the .ai country code top level domain. That's what we call it. So there's .com for commercial, there's .uk for the United Kingdom. Anguilla, because of our country code AIA, was blessed with .ai, which just happens to be synonymous with artificial intelligence. Now, Honorable, you'd have heard me in the House of Assembly on many times from my return in university in 2018 and joining the House in 2019, advocating for the potential financial benefits that the .ai and the domain we have, if we leverage it accordingly, could have for the economy here in Anguilla. And we've seen it grow from bringing in a measly $1 or $2 million to our economy to in 2025, it would have brought $230.5 million to the government of Anguilla's coffers. And to put that in relative terms, I believe in 2019, our entire local budget was around 198 million. So let's round it to 200 million. Our entire national budget, whether through taxes, whether through consolidated fund, whether through foreign direct investment, was 200 million. Last year alone, .ai brought in 230.5 million. Now, a lot of persons are saying, oh, this is as a result of the outsourcing of the .ai to Identity Digital, which was done via the previous administration. No, and I don't want to make it seem as if there's not value to working along with Identity Digital and there are not benefits that they can bring. Right. However, to say or assume that we would not have gotten to this point without them, I think that that's not only unfortunate because it speaks to not having faith in our local Anguillians to have been able to achieve this. And in terms of persons saying that I haven't been forthcoming with the contract, I haven't made the contract public. Well, the same way that the former premier would have said that once he got in, he would release the banking documents, and then said that once he saw the banking documents, he realized he could not release it due to certain things within the document. Likewise, I can say that there are aspects of the contract that preclude me from coming out and waving it to the people of Anguilla and saying, here you go, have a copy. And it would be irresponsible of me to do so. But I have spoken to some what I consider to be shortcomings are given some facts for the benefit of the people of Anguilla. Now, there is a minimum revenue agreement that Identity Digital has opted to pay. So there's a minimum that, let's say the .ai revenues were to go below, they are obligated to pay us. That figure is $1 million a month. Now, here's where I say that that's a disparity. And in last year we saw, that's US dollars. Last year on average, Anguilla was making...
You said it brought in over 200 million...
EC dollars.
That was EC.
That was EC dollars,
okay.
yes.
Yes.
So in overall figures, that would be around 85 million US dollars that it brought in last year. To say that if the revenues dip below what we promised to give you, we'll give you a minimum of 1 million US dollars a month, and that's guaranteeing you revenue. Well, a minimum of 1 million per month over 12 months is $12 million. So just by looking at the numbers of loan, the exponential growth rate, one could have easily extrapolated that this thing could have made over $12 million in the course of a year with its eyes closed. I'm sure that pretty soon, in fact, by next year, and looking at the extrapolations, and by putting certain strategic things that we're already working on in place, we're hoping to exceed over $12 million a month. However, there's another stipulation in the contract where up to the first $50 million, 10% comes to Identity Digital, with the remaining 90% coming to the Government of Anguilla.
Okay.
And I don't deny what the previous administration would have said, that this was better than the previous agreement that was in place, because when Mr. Kate would have started operating this, the original agreement was he would have gotten 25% and 75% coming to the government. But we also have to put things in context holistically. When this was making less than $100,000 a year, and he was running the service on behalf of the people, nobody was looking at, oh, he's making 25% of that. It's only now, since the artificial intelligence space has blown up, and we're starting to see these figures, that we are now hearing that, oh, who's he to get 25%? But the question is, if you extrapolated the numbers out, first of all, I would ask, why are you giving away 10% for? Anybody would be lucky to get 5% of that.
Right.
Or, depending on what service you're offering to the people of Anguilla, let's keep it all here locally and pay you on a contract, because we see this thing growing. Now,
but the percentage is all relative to the quantum.
All relative to the quantum, but there's something there that I saw that I really don't understand how they arrived at deciding to do this. As I said, up to the first $50 million, it's 10% to Identity Digital, 90% to the Government of Anguilla. Beyond 50 million, and remember last year it brought in 85 million. So we could say for the first 50 million, 5 million went to Identity Digital, 45 million came to the Government of Anguilla. For the remaining 85 million, then what that would split would now look like Identity Digital would get 13% and the Government of Anguilla would get 85%. Now, I'm still not sure to this day how they arrived at that calculation, that formulation, or the logic, but I would have thought that after you'd have secured a base amount of revenue, that their share would be less because we have guaranteed profits on both sides, and then our share would increase. When it looks at the key performance indicators aspect of the contract, something that I would either like to see revised and strengthened, the only key performance indicator that's outlined in the contract is revenue. Now, we're looking at the revenue going up from the early 2000s to the 2010s to artificial intelligence, and it's shooting up. How are you going to separate correlation from causation? And that's to say, just because it's going up, how are you going to prove that you are the reason it's going up when it was going up anyway? So I think a lot more thought could have been put into the contract in order to secure the Government of Anguilla's position. But what I will say, we are locked into a contract with them until 2030 in the first instance. They would have taken over management on January 15th, 2025, and it's a 5-year term for the contract. While we are going to work with them and we are put into this position, I think it's incumbent on us as the government of the day to do the responsible thing and work along with Identity Digital,
of course,
to grow the revenue, to grow the benefits, and to make sure, well, it's already a mutual beneficial arrangement, because as revenues go up, the share to both Identity Digital and to the Government of Anguilla goes up.
There's no need for animosity or repulsion, so to speak. We'll have to work with what we have there so that in general, the entire society in Anguilla will benefit from it. But I'll say this to you, Honorable. This whole .ai and artificial intelligence, we're going to have to come back and sit down and have a real 2-hour, 3-hour talk about it, because for me,
talk about it all day.
Well, I know, I know that, but for me, it's enlightening. It's not only enlightening, but it's informative, and I am sure that the listening and viewing audience would agree with me that we really and truly need to have you back here to talk about this in more detail going forward, because, like I said at the beginning, you have some heavy lifting. And it's transformational. We haven't even touched on infrastructure as yet, and but we'll have to do it, because it's just the facts, and we'll have to touch on it, and we'll have to go into more detail later on. From an infrastructural standpoint, a lot would have been talked about government buildings and office space and so on, and it's needed. Let me put it this way: on coming into office. What was the situation that you met in terms of the government buildings? Because we're going to talk about government buildings, we're going to talk about airport expansion, and there's several things that I have jotted down here that we're going to talk about. Let's deal with the government buildings first. What you would have met on the table when you assumed office as the Minister of Infrastructure in terms of government buildings?
Okay, before jumping directly into the government buildings, I want to officially put on record my sincere thanks for my team, my permanent secretary. At first I had acting permanent secretary Travis Carty. He is now my principal assistant secretary within the ministry, as well as for my permanent secretary now, Ms. Jackie Bryan Niles, as well as the entire team for the support that they've been giving me and for the guidance that they gave me, especially in the early days in terms of getting up to speed within the ministry.
I'm going to try and see if I could, later on in the show, as the program continues, to see if we could get some of the public servants, the senior civil servants, public servants in, so that we can sit in this setting here and really discuss, the ideas, the initiatives, the role that they play. And, of course, they are civil servants, and some people would view this program, just the facts, as if though it's political. But at the end of the day, the Anguilla United Front is the government. And we are the government, and civil servants work for the government. So it has to be a discussion, because the people of Anguilla needs to be informed. And not just to hear your voice or to hear the elected member's voice, but to hear from the civil servants who are working with the ministers in order to be able to get it done. So that is something going forward, and I appreciate you taking the time out to to really honor and to recognize the work and the assistance that they would have given you, over the last 11 months. But
yes,
go ahead.
And part of the reason, especially I wanted to start off by thanking them, is I think that there are a number of realities that aren't appreciated, not only by the general public, because generally they would have not known. Even me sitting in opposition, there are a number of realities that are faced throughout the government system, but particularly within the Ministry of Infrastructure, that are not known. And that is, the ministry is understaffed. There are a number of vacancies that impact delivery schedules. And when you talk about the extent of government projects, there are a number of projects that are under the remit and mandate of the Ministry of Infrastructure. But one of the things I've appreciated about the Ministry of Infrastructure is it's that ministry that interconnects all of the other ministries. So we're not only responsible for our capital projects, but for coordinating the capital projects of other ministries.
Yes.
So as it relates to the government buildings, the government accommodation buildings, there was $10 million in the budget for the commencement of these buildings allocated in the 2025 budget. But even though we would have heard about these buildings throughout 2024 and the months leading up to the campaign by the previous administration, upon taking office, we didn't have any designs, we didn't have any plans, consultations amongst the varying departments so that the needs of the varying departments would be factored in. A consultant or project manager had not been identified. So the core aspects of the planning that would have needed to have gone in in order for that $10 million to have been spent in the building to actually commence, properly planned, we ain't talking about just putting on blocks not knowing what you're trying to build.
Right.
That had not been done.
Okay.
So right now, a lot of those funds were reallocated or put towards other capital aspects at the time. And we are aggressively working within the ministry to get all of the preparatory works done so that we can commence them in the latter part of this year. Now, beyond the work not being done, again, I would have highlighted the fact that there are a number of vacancies and the team is spread very thin. When you're talking about managing the different procurement processes, procurement in itself takes time. And one of the things that I came to appreciate that I didn't realize before is how sometimes the process can be a bit fickle and you end up getting failed procurements. So if you have to put something out to tender for 6 to 8 weeks, so essentially 2 months for procurement, and then that tender fails.
Yeah.
You then have to revise the bid, send it out, effectively setting your schedule back by a further 2 months. And then, God forbid, that goes and fails again. So within the ministry, there's a need for proper planning because these projects tend to run on a span of planning at months at a time or over several years.
Yeah. But what about seeing that there is a human resource need, in the ministry? What about outsourcing some of these projects and some of the planning to it?
So one of the key aspects, that would have been one of the shortcomings that we would have identified within the ministry when we would have looked at our 2025 performance. You analyze what you did well, what could you do better, and in figuring out, these are our plans for 2026. This is what's budgeted, what do we need in order to succeed? We have placed an aggressive focus right now within the ministry in terms of getting the vacancies filled.
Okay.
We also have a space constraint, so we have planned an extension within the ministry because when you bring in these additional people, you need to have somewhere to put them. Right. But even beyond that, in the 2026 appropriations, in our budget discussions, we would have increased our allocations for professional consultancy to be able to outsource some of the project management work in particular, while at the same time putting in place new positions. So in the 2026 budget, we would have made an allocation for a second principal assistant secretary that we're hoping to have filled in the next few weeks. So the work.
What about engineers and architects and so on?
All of those. Even someone, an officer to just
project managers.
Project managers, but even an officer to just focus on contract performance, dealing with procurement and ensuring that deadlines are being met, and somebody to just focus on that alone. So we're essentially streamlining our operations, building our team, and yes, widening the tent to bring in support from the private sector to ensure that the 2026 budget and the objectives of government are met effectively, efficiently, and within budget.
And like I said earlier on, it's a lot of heavy lifting, and it's a ministry that, you see tangible things, and you've got to get the type of support, the type of technical expertise within the ministry so that we can deliver these things going forward. Like I said, there are so many topics to deal with, so we're just touching on these, and you will be back so that we could really
Indeed.
explain some of these things. Airport extension. A lot of talk about the airport project in general, the official opening of the terminal building, dismantling of the old, demolition of the old terminal building, and now we're at a phase where, the runway extension, is absolutely critical, necessary, and urgently needed. Where are we? We're going to go into detail on another thing, but now where are we?
So yes, as you'd have mentioned, we are approaching the completion of the airport terminal building aspect of it. The most recent phase would have been the demolition of the old terminal building, and now we are expanding the apron to cover the footprint of where the building stands, finishing up the parking lot and the entrances and exits. So we're expecting that part of the project to be completed by May or June of this year. Now, the extension part of the runway was something that we've been putting a lot of focus on since being in office, because in my first airport update, I was told that there's one critical bottleneck that we need to overcome, and it's the acquisition of lands. And when we would have taken office in early March, after the February elections, I was told that we need to start the runway extension by around May latest, and there's a reason for that. when you're extending the runway and you have to do walks on the existing part of the runway, you want it to be during your lowest trafficked period. So when the Americans aren't landing. So you have a strict period between around May in order to plan for, say, an August start to be able to complete those necessary walks by November ahead of the season.
Okay.
But despite needing to have the lands in hand by April or May to have the procurement put out in order to ensure contractors in place in order to make sure that everything is able to be developed on schedule, none of the lands that we required in order to extend the airport had been acquired by that time. So unfortunately, that would have delayed the extension being able to start. So since then, we've been working aggressively with the Director of Lands, especially with Kyle as Minister of Lands, along with our ministry, and I have to thank Mr. Kendall Richardson, the compliance officer within the ministry. He's now the acting Director of Public Utilities, but he's been instrumental from the ministry's aspect in terms of managing the project, as well as the chairman and the board of the Anguilla A&C Ports Authority, both present and past, for helping us to get to this stage where we're at now. So we've spent a lot of time getting legal advice because a lot of persons were saying, oh, just compulsory acquire the land for public use. And we would have seen the case from the initial runway extension when land was compulsory acquired. It would have gone back and forth in the courts up to the highest level of the Privy Council.
Right.
And that matter was only just decided on recently. Yeah. So imagine if we want to now start this project, we don't have 20 years to go back and forth in courts.
No.
So we've been getting legal advice. We've been speaking with landowners. And so we've been essentially structuring our plan as to what is the viable and fastest way to ensure that we can secure this land without all of the unnecessary tie-ups. And I can say that it's been going well so far. There are several ways to skin a cat, and we're looking to see if we could start skinning from the head and the tail at the same time.
Okay.
But one of the things that we've done is look at the procurement process. Rather than saying that we can't touch the runway at all until we have the necessary lands, we have broken up the procurement into 2 phases. And the procurement would have been issued in December, and it's currently out for persons to bid on. And I believe it ends on March 10th at the moment. So the first phase is looking at the lands that the government already owns.
Right.
So we would have the existing...
And start work on...
Exactly. We would have the existing runway that's there, as well as a few lands to the east that can be for the first part of the extension. Now, this phase will not only be the resurfacing of the existing runway, it will also include the building of the additional parallel taxiway. It will also have to do with a lot of filling of the runway, because persons may not realize it as we drive by. The runway looks like it's flat, but it actually curves downwards, comes back up, and then takes a big drop going down. So there are some places that we're going to need probably up to 30 feet of fill. So it's about identifying where do we get the fill, how are we going to fill it, what aspects of the runway can be done at night, what aspects can be done during the day, and timing all of this to ensure that we meet the deadline to catch the slow period so that work can start. So that's what we're currently focusing on doing, while also in parallel continuing the work to acquire the lands. And potentially, if we're able to acquire the necessary lands while phase 1 is going on, you can have both phases run concurrently. So even though we would have lost some time by not starting the runway last year, we may be able to make up for that time and finish earlier than planned.
Okay, that's crystal clear. Of course, roads comes under your ministry, part of your portfolio. The roads, the last major road investment that would have taken place here probably was 20 years ago, or within 20 years. When we were in government, we would have built the roads from the stoplight by Albert Lake, go all the way around through Sal Hill, go up through Island Harbor, come all the way around by Proctor's, and back to the stoplight. Yeah, that's about 2 decades now, and there are areas that really and truly needs to be resurfaced. Again, tourism is a key part of our revenue streams. Key industry in Anguilla. Most of the hotels or in the west, in District 7. There are some areas in the road going down to those hotels that we've got to look at. I mean, when we look at the area between Tasties, POV, and go down to the stoplight at Connors there, I mean, you know, so what are the plans? And then there's a number of dirt roads that are still here with us. There are a number of roads that are supposed to be cut, and you know, Mall, the issues with Mall, you just mentioned about filling for the airport and stuff like that. Where are we in terms of that, the road infrastructure?
Well, I would have mentioned earlier that the renewable energy transition is about 20 years too late. This budget that we would have just passed in the House of Assembly has the biggest allocation for road development that we've ever seen in Anguilla's history. And that's not just because Anguilla is making more money. It's because those roads that were built 20 years ago, there was not necessarily a strong focus placed on preventative maintenance. So when we look at that area of road that you mentioned between Tasties and the stoplight, it's in very, very poor condition because over the years it had not been maintained. So there are some aspects to the road where, yes, resurfacing can be done, but there are some where we're going to have to take up the entire road and start from the sub-base and build it back up. So in terms of the plan, one of the things that we've done outside of allocating money for new roads is allocating money for road maintenance, as well as for a road specialist to be able to come in and help us analyze the entire road network and propose, okay, in what would be better for this area. In other words, formulate a strategy to attacking the entire road network, rather than just saying this road here, this road there, put this in concrete, put this in asphalt, etc.
Yeah. And I hope that you know, included in that package of the specialists for road, that some traffic specialists need to be involved in there, because the traffic
we definitely need to analyze the flow of our traffic network,
and
yes,
so on and so forth. You know.
This afternoon I would have been going down the George Hill stretch, and you know that usual 5 and 6 o'clock traffic is getting worse and worse.
You wanted a lifting gear to get over?
It would have been nice to be able to fly over it, but beyond that, from the savings that we would have identified in the 2025 budget, we would have invested in some equipment whereby government would be able to go through and do some road maintenance itself. And because we know that we have the roads team that go out with the tar pan and fill the potholes, but in terms of, we have an issue with Mall in terms of being able to find Mall, and government is going out and investing in getting dirt roads, marled roads, but then 1 or 2 weeks pass, you get a heavy rain, and the Mall that we just find so hard to find and to prepare the road either gets washed away or the sun dries it out, and then people have to combat dust in their area, which also leads to health concerns, among other things. So we've invested in some equipment to be able to go and preserve those roads, to seal those roads. And interestingly enough, it would have been brought to our attention recently that a private company has also invested in similar equipment to be able to do so. And I know some persons may feel like there may now be some concerns. I mean, at the time when we would have made the decision to invest in that equipment, we were unaware that a private company was investing in the same. But it goes to show, one, great minds think alike, and two, this is a good investment going forward. And I want to we would have met with the entity since, as government, and given them the assurance that it's not government's intention to compete with the private sector. Because when we really look at it, there's enough dirt roads around here that we could be putting out major roads, to procurement via asphalt, side roads privately to chip and seal via government, and we could be paving roads 24/7 between now and 2030, and we wouldn't attack all the dirt roads that we got in Anguilla.
Well, you know.
But the other good thing is, in terms of talking to, again, private entities, there's a local entity that has invested in an asphalt plant.
Of course.
And so we're hoping that in short order, we can have local money invested into the road development of our major, what we would consider the class 1 roads. And the major roads that we need asphalt is the same one like by Tasties, going down past the stop, like the main arteries within Anguilla, so to speak. So not only for 2026, but I think that this is going to be an aggressive time for road development. I'm not sure if the PALSEC would want anything to weigh, but I'm excited for what's to come in terms of road and that kind of infrastructural development in the near future.
But going back to when you mentioned that government has invested in purchasing some equipment, for chip and sealing the roads and so on and so forth. And a private company has also invested in equipment and asphalt plant and so on. There's enough room in the inn for government and the private sector, because like I say, Anguilla is, expanding, When I was born in Shoalway, there wasn't a road, now there are roads all over the country. So I don't think it's a matter of competing, it's just basically working together to be able to provide the infrastructure that the country so dearly needs, At one time, there was one Chinese operation in Anguilla. Now they're all over the place and they're all surviving. So why can't the government, with their chip and seal, along with the private company, get involved?
I mean, even beyond that, if we look at water production, yes, the government provides water, but you also have a number of private water companies that are still in the water business that are able to coexist in harmony.
And a lot of us got our own systems as well. So at the end of the day, that is one of the things. You were saying something, Honorable, in terms of the road the infrastructure?
Well, shows the adequately
Okay.
to the situation. But one thing I must say, there's a lot of roads that need to be done, and I would have driven with different ministers and visited some of the roads within their districts, and there are a lot of dirty roads, and even like you spoke about the primary road infrastructure. So we have a lot of work to do, and a lot of work to do. We're up to the task to getting it done as an administration.
And let me say this. During the last campaign, I was a rookie in terms of Island Wide, and I had to drive into some areas that I didn't know exist. In terms of the roads, and folks got some wonderful homes. And we've got to be able to provide that infrastructure in order to get it there. While we're on roads, let me touch on the road from South Hill to the Jeremiah Gums highway that the previous administration would have started, and then it had stopped for a while, and I see it's back on track. What are some of the issues, Minister, with respect to, there was a pause and so on and so forth? What could you tell the viewers and the listeners with respect to that?
So as it relates to the slowing down of works on that road, there were a number of factors that would have contributed to that. Some on the aspect of government and some on the aspect of the contractor. So for example, from government side, there would have been some changes to the design of the road. For example, when the road was initially designed, it did not factor in sidewalks, but then the decision was made to include sidewalks in the design. So, you'd have had to revise the design. That would have taken some time. But initially, when you would have costed out the road, you would have needed a certain amount of land to be acquired without considering sidewalks. But when you add sidewalks, there's more land, of course, you would need to be acquired. And similar to the airport, the lands had not been acquired by the time we came in. Okay. In fact, we would have inquired about the landowners who would have been engaged. Who are the list of landowners affected? Have they been engaged? We would have found that, to our conscience, they weren't adequately engaged in terms of negotiations. So those negotiations would have taken some more time, so that when we would have properly evaluated how much money we would have needed to acquire those lands, whether via negotiation or compulsory acquisition, we had a better idea of what we were going into. So that process would have taken some time. But while that was also taking place, we would have known that the contractor who was originally working on that project would have unfortunately recently passed away. And so his son has taken over operations of the project and the company. Now, beyond his son taking over, they would have recently invested in some new equipment, and it would have been sourced. I can't remember which market it would have been sourced from specifically, but in terms of it came to the point where those machines had needed to undergo some maintenance. And in terms of finding the parts and the stuff that was necessary, because it was from a niche market, that took some time. So that impacted work on the contractor's part from being able to get the machines up and running, which slowed him down a bit. But eventually he was able to overcome that hurdle. We were able to acquire the lands, and the work on that road has progressed very quickly, and it's going on very smoothly. Okay. We hope it to be completed by April of this year.
Yeah, I'm hoping that we'll get it completed. It seems as if though all of those issues that were not addressed previously, been taken care of now? What about in terms of the light pole, did you have to do any kind of work with them, move them around?
Yes. So first of all, it would have been really good to have seen that entire area move all of the utilities and everything underground. Unfortunately, that was not the case because that wasn't necessarily planned for, and that would have further delayed the project and the delivery of the project. But what needed to be done in terms of the poles, because we are putting in the sidewalks, you had to acquire more land to facilitate the sidewalks.
Okay.
The poles had to go behind the sidewalk, so again, even more land. And then once you had the necessary lands, you then had to work with Anglic to relocate the poles from their existing locations further back. Mm-hmm. And then you then had to wait until the utilities came in, telecoms came in to relocate the lines. Mm-hmm. Anglic then removed the poles before you could have had work on the eastern side, the sidewalk, and that eastern lane commence.
Right.
So again, had all of the lands been in place before, we would have been able to relocate the poles immediately and work would have been able to commence on the eastern lane ahead of time. But what we did, we just decided, okay, if we could work on the western side for now, push work on the western side, go down while we acquire the lands. So work progressed very much down the hill. And then once the lands had been acquired, the poles had been relocated, we came back up and we went back down.
Okay, great. My final question, is in relation to Blown Point. You're the Minister of Infrastructure, and the Honorable Kyle Hodge is the Minister of Lands as well. But the concern that I have is with the Blowing Point, the ferry terminal, as well as the surrounding lands, and the issue with respect to lands that I know was acquired when I was part of a previous administration. And it seemed as if though those lands were given back or returned to the previous owners, and developments have taken place on said lands. And I'm sure the unfortunate incident that took place down at Blowing Point several months ago raises concerns about security and buffer zones and all of those sort of things. We will have the Honorable Kyle Hodge at some point in time here in terms of the lands, but in terms of that infrastructure, it's a seaport. We have ASPA, and I'm hoping that we'll be able to have some of the employees, the senior employees in ASPA, sit down in this environment so we can, have discussions concerning overall port development, and so on and so forth, and the issues that will be that they are experiencing. But in terms of that whole Blowing Point thing, I see there was a road that was recently
the exit road?
Yeah, exit road and so on. But and then in terms of that whole thing, what are your thoughts, going forward?
Well, I'll give a bit of the history on the situation. So after we would have assumed office, we know that we would have recently had a newly constructed Blowing Point ferry terminal. But if you remember, the exit road was in quite horrible condition. So much so that people were hitting the bottom pans and damaging underneath of their car. And one of the criticisms we used to hear constantly, despite us inheriting this, is, oh, this is a 5-star destination where most of our people's first impression coming to Anguilla is the Blowing Point ferry terminal, and the first road they drive on is in such terrible and deplorable state. Now, persons may not have known this because looking into the matter, it was the first time I discovered it. The Blowing Point ferry terminal that we have now, while no doubt far better than what we had before, the original design for the Blowing Point ferry terminal, it was supposed to be around 35,000 square feet of usable space. It might have been even a bit bigger, not counting the usable space, but 35,000 square feet of usable space. The existing terminal that we have was downsized. The existing terminal is 15,000 square feet. So when you run the match just by comparison, the terminal that we have now is less than half the size of the original design for the terminal. Now, what that has done, we have seen, even though it's a modern terminal and better than what we have before, sometimes you go down there and you see long lines of persons either coming into Anguilla since the increase of day trippers, or persons trying to get out of Anguilla to return to St. Martin. We see that it has added a lot of confusion at the port in terms of the mixing and the mingling of the persons going on the public ferry and those going under private charters, because they have to go through the same line to pay departure tax and to clear the security, etc. And it hasn't really left much room for growth or separation to address these issues. So unfortunately, while we welcome the new investment in the terminal, it is already outgrowing its size due to the downsizing. Now, after it was downsized, a decision was made to give back the lands that had already been compulsory acquired. Now, under the previous Minister of Infrastructure, and I'm going back 2 Ministers of Infrastructure, Mr. Curtis Richardson, he would have, during his time, ensured that the lands were acquired around the area for port development in order to facilitate that new port at a greater magnitude. The previous administration, where the Ministry of Infrastructure was taken over by Hayden Hughes at the time, they would have made a policy decision to return the lands that had been acquired to the landowners. Now, this has presented us with some challenges. As you would have mentioned, you'd have alluded to the incident where someone unfortunately lost their life at the port. Now, around ports, you're supposed to have a security buffer. Yeah. And by giving back the private lands, you've reduced your capacity to establish those buffers and establish security around the port.
The reference, I made reference to an incident where there wasn't loss of life in that incident.
Oh, sorry. Yes. Yeah. Thank you for the correction.
Yeah,
yes.
It wasn't loss of life, but it was
yes.
an unfortunate,
unfortunate incident.
Gun-related incident.
Yes, and thank you for the correction. The other issue that we had is some of the lands that had been returned that were earmarked for future development and future growth of the port. The private landowners, after getting them back, have already started to build establishments and construct around the port. Now, this makes it, one, difficult to reacquire the lands, even if you had to compulsory acquire. If you were compulsory acquire a piece of land that has a structure on it, now you have to demolish the structure. The structure would have come at a cost to the individual. You have to now pay them for that cost. So essentially, in order to take back the lands, you'll be paying a much higher fee and much higher cost. It also has security concerns for persons being within that level of proximity to the port. But something as simple as that exit road being done, due to how the legislation is for private roads and it being bounded to different landowners, you had to get the consent of the varying landowners to be able to do it. Even if all of the road was on one person's land and they say, go ahead, you can use it to develop it, if we were to do it through the ministry, the next landowner next to them has to agree. So again, you have to find different ways to skin a cat, and I have to thank the board of ASPA, the CEO of ASPA, and the landowners in particular for working with the government and ASPA to agree. So ASPA was the body that we were able to go through as an avenue to be able to have that road developed. So now when you come to Anguilla, you don't have to have that bumpy road as your first experience. However, in terms of future port development, in terms of the experience for person using our ports, both going and coming, and as ASPA grows, and the staffing grows, it's much harder for us to expand. For example, one thing that's not ideal at our port at the moment is that boat operators who want to come to launch their boats have to drive through the entrance of the port to go to the establishment that's by the beach on the eastern side of the port. Now, ideally, you wouldn't have any private traffic going through the port in order to get access to a beach. You'd have the full area contained and secured. But because there is no private access, given that the lands around the port are privately owned or had been given back, we are not able to make that separation at this time. Yeah. So we are working with ASPA to see what we can do to address. In some cases, we will be trying to see if we can go back the route of compulsory acquisition. But here's the challenge that we face. When acquiring lands via compulsory acquisition, it has to be for public interest or public purpose. Yeah. If government acquires it and says it's for public interest and public purpose, and we compulsory acquire it, and then we give it back, the family can now argue in the courts that if it was really for public purpose, I was that interested, you would not have given it back in the first place. So it actually makes it more difficult to reacquire. So not only would government be expected to pay more, the burden of proof for government to actually be able to win the case in the courts is higher.
Yeah, but in terms of the reality of what is happening, and I don't know anything about ports and stuff like that, but I'm looking at it from a security standpoint and a buffer zone. I don't know what is required, but let's say the requirements are that there is 50 feet or 80 feet away from the port of entry based on what took place, the unfortunate incident. Um, uh, somebody from ASPA should be able to answer the question, what is required, and if there is a possibility of whether downgrading the port or shutting down the port for the lack of proper security and so on and so forth. I don't know how that get into
Well,
the mix of
the
things.
regulators have been quite understanding of the situation, and in speaking with the persons at ASPA, there are different ways around addressing the buffer zones. So say, for example, you may have it where you need to have increased security, where because you don't have, if it's 50 feet and you only have 30 and you don't have that requirement, you may have to double the security you have in that period to be able to do it. You may have to push back persons being able to drive into the port, which means a longer walk for the visitors, and it'll have certain impacts. But there are different ways we are looking to address it, but all of them will come at a cost.
Right.
So in terms of long term, if you have to increase security just to get more visitors, operationally, you're not making as much in terms of a return. So long term, it might be cheaper for us to go the route of compulsory acquiring, even though we'll have to pay a higher cost if we want to secure the best case scenario for long term development.
And it all comes down to what I would term as futuristic planning. You know, you plan for the future as opposed to, you know, just now. You did mention that what we have there, and it is a fact, that is much better than what we had before. But, you know, the thought process that went into the planning in terms of, you know, looking at the growth, looking at, you know, the usage of the facility, you know, going forward. Honorable, we can sit and talk for several more hours. It has been a pleasure, you know, having you here and expound on the various aspects and the projects that are taking place within the Ministry of Infrastructure. I must commend you for the work that you've been doing, being the youngest minister and elected representative of the people of Anguilla, and also to the representative.
Jason is the youngest elected representative at this time.
At this time.
At this time.
But I'm talking historically now.
Yes.
Because when Jason was elected, he was older.
Yeah,
than
he was
you
still
were
older than I was at the time.
At,
Yes.
at the time. So historically. And you're right, you're not the youngest now, you know, Jason is. So yeah, I put that in there. And for the representative of the largest district in Anguilla, and then as he mentioned, he's the new kid on the block, learning the trenches, you know, very quickly. Be yourself, you know, and at the end of the day, you know, everything else will work out. It's the same thing with the Honorable Jose. I just want to thank you all for being here. It was entertaining. For me, it was not only informative but educational in terms of what you are doing, both of you are doing in the various ministries and so on. So I want to thank you all for coming in. But this is the first in this setting, and God's willing it won't be the last, because there are a lot of things and there are a lot of other topics and questions that I have jotted down here. But I want to thank you for coming. I want to thank the listening and viewing audiences for their patience with us and their understanding. And we look forward to next week, Tuesday, God's willing, at 8 p.m. when we bring you another program, Just the Facts. Thank you all very much, and have a pleasant evening.